silent prayer for the victims of 9/11.
That was earlier this morning, and just moments ago, President Trump wrapped up a briefing with reporters where he talked about several issues, including John Bolton's departure, guns, and taking action against electronic cigarettes. Let's listen in.
Good statement to make. You just take a look
Listen
at what
up.
happened with Gaddafi. That was not a good statement to make, and it set us back. And frankly, he wanted to do things not necessarily tougher than me. You know, John's known as a tough guy. He's so tough he got us into Iraq. That's tough. And but he's somebody that I actually had a very good relationship with, but he wasn't getting along with people in the administration that I consider very important. And I hope we've left in good stead, but maybe we haven't, maybe we haven't. I have to run the country the way we're running the country. We're doing very well. We're respected all over the world again. Respected like we haven't been respected in many, many years. You look at Iran and you look at so many of the things that are happening. Iran wants to talk. They all want to talk. We're doing very well with China. And you probably saw the numbers that have come out, some of them coming out just today. But China's, their supply chain is breaking up. The supply chain of China, which was this unbreakable, powerful tool that they had, is breaking up like a toy, because companies are moving out and China wants to make a deal. We'll see what happens. We have to make the right deal for this country. China's been taking out hundreds of billions of dollars a year out of our country. And you know, I read papers like the Wall Street Journal. They don't have a clue. They haven't got a clue. They don't make any excuses for the fact that China has been literally ripping off the United States in the worst manner for so many years. $500 billion pouring out of the United States. And I hear people, I don't even know, do these people have any education on anything? It's common sense maybe more than anything else. But I look at some statements that are made from so many different people. And you know, John wasn't in line with what we were doing. And actually, in some cases, he thought it was too tough what we were doing. Mr. Tough Guy, you know, you have to go into Iraq. Going into Iraq was something that he felt very strongly about. So we're right now in for over $7 trillion into the Middle East. And I don't say it was his decision. You had a president and you had other people also, but he was very out there, I can tell you, and wanting to have them do it. And I disagreed with that decision from the beginning, even though I was a civilian, so nobody cared. But I was out there. I was outspoken about it. I thought it was a terrible mistake. Here we are many, many years later, decades later, and we're still there. And we've been acting as policemen. And I'll tell you one thing, we are hitting the Taliban right now harder than they've ever been hit. And what they did was horrible. When they killed a great American soldier, when they killed 12 people, innocent people, essentially innocent people. Because if you look, I mean, many of these people were civilians. You also had a NATO soldier, in addition to our great soldier. But when they did what they did in order to create what they thought was a better negotiating stance, I said, that's the end of them. Get them out. I don't want anything to do with them.
Hallelujah.
And they've been hit very hard. And I know for a fact they said that was a big mistake that they made, and it was. But that was my decision. And what we're doing now is my decision. So we have a lot of great people that want that position. A lot of great people want a lot of positions. They want to be a part of this administration. We've done more in this administration in less than 3 years than I believe any president. You look at the accomplishments. Even today, what we're doing. You look at what we're doing today. These are big things. Nobody else would be doing this. They're big things. But we've done more than any administration probably in the history of the country. You just look at one point after another point, whether it's regulation cuts, whether it's tax cuts. You look at right to try with these two gentlemen, so important, right to try, where people are able to use some of the incredible innovations that we've developed with the greatest labs and the greatest doctors in the world, and they could use them instead of being forced to move to and leave to other countries that don't have a clue compared to us, and now they have right to try. And by the way, a lot of people are being saved. A lot of great things are happening with right to try. But what we've done for the vets, what we've done for our great military, with spending this year $718 billion. And by the way, that's also jobs, secondarily, but it's also jobs. Nobody's done what we've done, and we're very honored to have done it. We're in a very good footing. Our country is respected again.
I want to weigh in right there. First of all, he did take on a assignment, Mr. Trump did, that was already a chaotic situation pertaining to everything that he's talking about right now. And believe it or not, his shoulders are really, really strong. He's got thick skin towards being able to go in there and fight the wolves and fight the lions the way that he has. I wouldn't want to be under that type of stress and that type of scrutiny 24/7, to the point that everything that you say and everything that you do gets judged, it gets prejudged, gets analyzed, it gets scrutinized. He's held up well under the conditions of him being so strenuous and so chaotic. But at the same time, in the eyes of others, as well as myself, we have a tendency of questioning his true motives pertaining to international affairs, of whether or not his international affairs are for the benefit of himself, or international affairs are for the benefit of we the people here in America. This is 9/11. This is the anniversary, the 18th anniversary of 9/11. And there's no doubt it's become a tipping point, teeter-tottering, walking on eggshells, of not knowing exactly towards reading the manual, and how in the world are we ever going to dig our way out of this situation that 2 or 3 other administrations has relentlessly put us in. It's embarrassing for the country to be in the shape that it's in right now financially, as far as our national debt. It's embarrassing that we have let things go as long as they have pertaining to the narcotic opioid addiction drugs, as well as the border down on the southern border that was just totally out of control. It's embarrassing, very shameful, whenever you have a country the size and as strong as the American country is, towards it going backwards the way that it has. You have to look at the underlining factors of how come this has happened the way that it has, towards us being trillions and trillions of dollars in debt and 2.3 million incarcerated prisoners, either in local, state, or federal jails. You have to ask some fundamental questions about what the heck happened to the American people and their stance in the world pertaining to being so upside down the way that we are. So no, I don't bash him directly towards the position that he has walked off into, because it's been a horrible, horrible position to deal with so many different factors on so many different levels. Let's just listen.
Well, I have 5 people that want it very much. I mean, a lot more than that would like to have it, but there are 5 people that I consider very highly qualified, good people I've gotten to know over the last 3 years. And we'll be announcing somebody next week, but we have some very highly qualified people. But we were set back very badly when John Bolton talked about the Libyan model, and he made a mistake. And as soon as he mentioned that, the Libyan model, what a disaster. Take a look at what happened to Gaddafi with the Libyan model. And he's using that to make a deal with North Korea. And I don't blame Kim Jong-un for what he said after that. And he wanted nothing to do with John Bolton. And that's not a question of being tough. That's a question of being not smart to say something like that. So I wish John the best. We actually got along very well. I'm sure he'll, do whatever he can do to, spin it his way. John came to see me the night before. In fact, I think a lot of you people are out there waiting for me to get on the helicopter. I'm sure you have a shot somewhere along the line. And he sat right in that chair. And I told him, John, you have too many people, you're not getting along with people, and a lot of us, including me, disagree with some of your tactics and some of your ideas. And I wish you well, but I'd like you to submit your resignation, and he did that. And I know he's going to do well. I hope he's going to do well, and I wish him well.
Mr. Trump, what are you prepared to do on guns, on background checks? What are you prepared to announce?
So I just spoke with Senator Toomey and Senator Murphy and Senator Joe Manchin. Just had a long talk with them just before this meeting, just hung up. And we are working very, very hard together, all of us, so we're seeing if we can come up with something that's acceptable to everybody. It's a subject that's been going on for decades. Decades they've been talking about it. So we're looking at background checks, and we're looking at putting everything together in a unified way so that we can have something that's meaningful. At the same time, all of us want to protect our great Second Amendment. It's very important to all of us. So we are now in meetings. The meetings are going to go on tonight. I'm going to speak with them again tomorrow. And I think progress is being made. I hope so.
Are you willing to put background checks on all private gun sales?
We're going to take a look at a lot of different things, and we'll be reporting back in a fairly short period of time. There are a lot of things under discussion. Some things will never happen, and some things can really some very meaningful things can happen. It's really a gun sense, if you think about it. What we're looking at is, and maybe that's what we should call it, the gun sense bill. But we're having great dialogue. We'll see what happens.
And did you tell your chief of staff to have NOAA disavow those forecasters who said that Alabama was not?
No, I never did that. That's a whole hoax by the fake news media when they talk about the hurricane and when they talk about Florida and they talk about Alabama. That's just fake news. It was right from the beginning. It was a fake story. And while we're here and while we're talking about that, I want to congratulate Dan Bishop last night on an incredible win. Dan was 17 points behind 3 weeks ago. The media thought he was going to lose. They were all set to have a big celebration with their partners from the Democrat Party. And Dan Bishop worked really hard, and I worked very hard with him. And he made up a 17-point lead in a few weeks. And he won a great election last night, and also Greg Murphy, which nobody's even reporting, but Greg Murphy won a great congressional election in North Carolina last night. And I want to congratulate between Dan and Greg, what a job they did. We pick up 2 seats, and Greg was, anticipated to win by 2 or 3 points, maybe less, but 2 or 3 points, and he won by many, many points. I don't know what the final tab is, but he won by a lot. And he campaigned brilliantly, and Dan campaigned brilliantly, and so we're very happy about that. That's a tremendous win for the Republican Party. Okay?
Mr. President.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now that Joe Bolton is gone, is your policy on Venezuela going to change? Are you open to meeting?
Well, we have a policy on Venezuela that's a firm policy. Venezuela is really hurting, and we're trying to help people in a humanitarian way. That's probably not good in terms of, crushing a terrible regime, but yeah, people dying. This is a country that 15 years ago was one of the wealthiest countries, and now it's dying. They don't have water, they don't have food, they don't have medical, they have nothing. So we're trying to help as much as we can. We're also working with Colombia, and the leader of Colombia is a friend of mine, and he's doing a really good job, I can tell you that. We're working with Colombia, we're working with Brazil, we're working with other countries on a humanitarian basis. Venezuela is in very sad shape. That shows you about socialism. I mean, that shows you what happens. You take a country that was so wealthy 15 years ago, and today they don't have water and they don't have basic food. So we'll see what happens. No, I disagreed with John Bolton on his attitudes on Venezuela. I thought he was way out of line, and I think I've proven to be right. But we are always watching Venezuela very, very closely.
And would you be open to meeting with Maduro?
I don't want to talk about that.
Mr. President, with your announcement today, are you concerned that the companies that were making these products will be treated unfairly by taking these products off the market?
Well, they've become very rich companies very fast, and the whole thing with vaping is been very profitable. And I want companies. Look, you know that I fight for our companies very hard. I fight. That's why I'm fighting with China. That's why I'm fighting with other countries. If you look at European Union, and if you look at Japan, and if you look at so many others, including South Korea and many others, we're constantly dealing with them to make it good for our companies, because I view it as jobs. I view it as income for our country and jobs. Vaping has become a very big business, as I understand it, like a giant business in a very short period of time. But we can't allow people to get sick, and we can't have our youth be so affected. And I'm hearing it, and that's how the First Lady got involved. She's got a son together that is a beautiful young man, and she feels very, very strongly about it. She's seen it. We're both reading it. A lot of people are reading it, but people are dying with vaping. So we're looking at it very closely. And, you know, if nothing else, this is a conference that's going to let people know about it, because people are going to watch what we're saying. And parents are going to be a lot tougher with respect to their children. A lot of people think vaping is wonderful, it's great. It's really not wonderful. That's one thing I think we can say definitely, Commissioner. It's not a wonderful thing. It's got big problems. We have to find out the extent of the problem. It's so new. It's so new. But we're going to find out. And I hope that parents that, you know, they have children and the children are a certain age, I hope they're going to be able to make wise decisions, maybe based on what we're saying today. But the Commissioner and Alex Azar, they're going to be coming back over the next pretty short period of time, a couple of weeks, with some very strong recommendations.
Can you tell us what the timeline is for taking those flavors off the market?
Alex?
Yes, so it'll take several weeks for us to put out the final guidance that would announce all the parameters around the enforcement policy. And then there will likely be about a 30-day delayed effective date, as is customary with FDA's good guidance practices. And at that point, all flavored e-cigarettes other than tobacco flavor would have to be removed from the market. Tobacco flavored e-cigarettes, their manufacturers would by May 2020 have to file for approval by FDA of their products. The other flavored product manufacturers can at any time also file, but they would be off the market until approved by FDA. The Obama administration had allowed these products to go onto the market in an unregulated way by delaying any enforcement in the hopes that people who are using combustible tobacco would transition to a less harmful form of nicotine delivery through e-cigarettes. But what we've seen is the data just shows the kids are getting access to these products in spite of our best efforts at enforcement, at retail enforcement, at controlling locations, at over 8,000 warning letters to retailers and others, in spite of moving products off shelves. They've been going at it, so we simply have to remove these attractive flavored products from the marketplace until they secure FDA approval if they can.
Mr. President, are you looking at arranging a meeting with Iranian President Rouhani at UNGA?
I'm not looking at anything. Iran is a different country than it was 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago, they were given A lot of money by President Obama previous to that, $150 billion, $1.8 billion in cash, in actual cash. It's very impressive. But they are a much different country right now than they were 2.5 years ago when I came into office. And I do believe they'd like to make a deal. If they do, that's great, and if they don't, that's great too. But they have tremendous financial difficulty, and the sanctions are getting tougher and tougher. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon, and they never will have a nuclear weapon. If they're thinking about enrichment, they can forget about it, because it's going to be very dangerous for them to enrich. Very, very dangerous. Okay. So you can spread the word to Iran.
Would you consider easing sanctions to make a meeting happen?
We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think Iran has potential, and I think North Korea. Those are two countries we're dealing with right now at a very high level. And I think Iran has a tremendous, tremendous potential. They're incredible people. We're not looking for regime change. We hope that we can make a deal, and if we can't make a deal, that's fine too. Okay, that's fine too. But I think they have to make a deal. They've never been in this condition. By the way, China is having the worst year they've had now in 57 years, okay, 57. It was 27, it was 22, and then 27. It's 57 years is the worst year they've had. And it's only going to get worse. So I think they want to make a deal too. We're dealing with them, but I think they want to make a deal. As you know, they're coming in sometime in early October, and we're speaking to them constantly. And they also, they made a couple of moves last night that were pretty good. You saw that, right? They were pretty good. They were pretty respectful to our people. You're going to see it because you were one of the people that reported it, your group. But China is about having to do with tariffs, Jeff. Having to do, you saw what they did. They took tariffs off certain things, a lot of things.
And you're happy about that?
Well, I think they did the right thing. I think it was good for them, but they took them off. Yeah, I think it was a gesture. Okay, but it was a big move. People were shocked. I wasn't shocked, but I deal with them, and I know them, and I like them, and I hope we can do something. And with respect to Iran, I think they have to do something because they have potential to have an unbelievably great country. But the way it's going right now, it's disintegrating, and I don't think they should allow that to happen. North Korea has tremendous potential. North Korea is in between Russia, China, and South Korea. It's an incredible people. I think that they really will, they have this truly unbelievable potential, and I think they want to get to it. We'll see what happens. I mean, maybe they do and maybe they won't. I mean, you're just going to see. But I really believe that North Korea would like to see something tremendous happen. This could be one of the most unbelievable, if you look at a country in terms of upside, this could be one of the most unbelievable experiments ever, North Korea. And I also say the same with Iran. Iran can get back to business. They can do unbelievably well with all of the natural things that they have. So on vaping, just to finish, this is all about vaping. This is a meeting that gets off a little track because you ask us questions about other things, and I think we're better off answering them than not. But we are looking at vaping very strongly. It's very dangerous. Children have died, people have died. And the acting commissioner is somebody that's a true expert on it, as much as you can be an expert on a brand new subject. And we're going to have some very strong rules, regulations, and more importantly, I think we're going to have some very important information come out very shortly, okay? And we'll be reporting that over the next couple of weeks. And I want to thank you, and Commissioner, I want to thank you very much, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, President. Thank you, President. Thank you.
This is simply my opinion about vaping. It's the same thing as the suicide rate. I was reading or watching TV yesterday pertaining to gun violence, and they claim that almost 1 million people take their lives here in America. I think it was like 800,000 people took their life last year the statistics were just absolutely off the charts pertaining to self-induced suicide. Whenever you have an atmosphere of a society such as been created because of the past 2 or 3 administrations before the one that's in power now, that has caused so many dreams and so many ideals to go down the tubes. When you have so deep a failure in politics in regard to all our jobs left America and either went to South America or Mexico or China or Japan or somewhere. Whenever you have this extreme deterioration of a country that is now, I hate to use the analogy, on its last leg, but it's really true of a country that has dug itself off into a pit, a hole, and there's really no hope in sight pertaining to us turning this national debt that I was told yesterday was $23 trillion instead of $22.5 trillion. Whenever you have a nation that can no longer self-sustain itself as far as the almighty dollar bill, other than the rich and the powerful still getting rich and powerful, in which there's a few of them that's now taking some hits, because eventually I kind of see society as a bunch of fish in a pond or in a lake or even in an ocean, to the point that the big fish has to feed off of the little fish. And whenever the big fish has ate up all the little fish and the big fish don't have nothing else to eat off of, then the big fish starts eating on the big fish. I kind of see that with your stronger enterprises, your conglomerates, that eventually whenever there's not enough poor people, whenever there's not enough working class people that they can take advantage of, then is whenever they start eating on each other. And after they eat on each other for a certain length of time, then this great nation, financially speaking, will collapse, similar to how the country over in Rome collapsed. It collapsed from the inside out. It didn't collapse from the outside. It collapsed from the inside. And that's similar towards the cancer or the deterioration that we're seeing here in America right now. So, in essence, we really are on our last leg pertaining to the national debt that now looms over the American people's heads. And I have said before, and I'll say again, there is really no other solution to that problem other than declaring bankruptcy, defaulting on that, and starting all over again with a brand new system, with a brand new money currency or a cashless society pertaining to chips or the Bitcoin or scenario of what they're using towards digital money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There really is no true solution to the problem that we have inevitably dug ourselves off into. The only problem is whenever you default, if you don't have good, strong relations with your allies, you take a chance on them getting down and dirty and actually attacking you in an act of war. Not an act of terrorism, but an act of war. Similar towards what happened here in Pearl Harbor. That was an act of war against one military institution attacking another military institution. What we're dealing with today is a bunch of thugs pertaining to the Taliban that has fostered ISIS and any other radical, cruel, indifferent group over there in the Middle East. And instead of their military installation attacking our military installation, they attacked our civilian life over here, which puts them in the category of being terrorist towards them doing that. In other words, they wasn't fighting fair. And you have to ask yourself a question, well, is a war, in generally speaking, ever been fair? I don't think so. That's the reason why that I have studied the 4 chapters of Revelations the way that I have, the first 4, in regard to God himself speaking through John the Revelator on the island of Patmos, and defying himself very, very clearly that even God has bitterness and hatefulness towards those who profess themselves to be Jews and are not, and those who follow under the guidingness of Balak and Balaam. Whenever you get to studying that is in correspondence with Daniel, the last chapter of Daniel, you'll understand that these are biblical Bible prophecies that I don't know that Donald Trump has yet clarified that he truly understands what God's intent is in trying to develop, manufacture peace, safety, and security for all of humanity all over the world. Maybe those are, in fact, attempts in tactics that Donald Trump is trying to persuade not only our alliances but also our enemies. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in and on the political front. The only thing that I know is that we are seeing people that are at their wits' end, or they feel like that they are, because all the factories are shut down, and it's almost like tombstones that Donald Trump talked about in his inauguration, I believe it was, that all these factories that is shut down is similar to tombstones that are sitting idle now, that used to produce products for the world, used to produce work and insurance and etc., that are no longer in existence. And whenever you have that, you also have an environment of lack of morale. And when you have an environment of lack of morale, you're going to have people that are going to fill up the bars, that are going to fill up the taverns, the saloons, the nightclubs, to wash away the bad memories of not having hope, okay? But you're also going to have people that are going to exchange a little bit of self-gratification in stimulating their nerve system by either smoking, doing drugs, drinking, vaping, or all of the above. It is a formula of catastrophe whenever it comes to the citizens of a great nation such as where we are versus where we was. And of course 9/11 that occurred, that basically hit the very blood vein, the main artery in America whenever it come to, I guess I'm going to use the word stock exchange, towards exchanging let's say 20 chickens for one goat. I'm just going to use that type of analogy. Even North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina was concerned that they was going to be second on the hit list pertaining to the financial institutions over in that area, because they are very, very powerful in that entity. But whenever you combine all these problems together, you have a formula of catastrophe. You have a formula of disaster. I have even looked deeper into the problem, going all the way back to the exchange of whenever the internet was created. Because before the internet was created in the 80s, believe it or not, we was in fact a self-sustainable country. We was the leading manufacturer in agriculture, in medicine, in almost every other group out there. We was the leading manufacturer of. And if you look at the drug problem that basically started in the early 90s, that has led to where we are now, it's because of the morale. When you have a toxic environment that has led into doom and gloom, that's all people can see is doom and gloom, because all the jobs has went away and the benefits has went away, and you got a society that's basically just barely hanging on. You'll have a society that will lean towards, hey, what difference does it make if I go ahead and do a little vaping? What difference does it make if I go ahead and get hooked on narcotic opioids? What difference does it make if I take up crime and if I wind up getting caught and spending the rest of my life in jail because they have branded me as me being this or branded me as being that? It all falls down, and I don't mean to rub salt in the wound, but it all falls down to the professionals, the people that we put in charge, that we put our life's interest in, going all the way back to the Reagan administration in the 80s. There was a failure of communication, that a group of people thought that they could manipulate God and manipulate God's people by not being honest with their people pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy. And I truly believe, and I'll always believe this, I may die tomorrow of a massive heart attack or a stroke or a bad accident. But I truly believe that if the government of America would have done the proper and right thing, rather than speaking, white man speaketh with forked tongue, towards saying one thing but doing just the opposite pertaining to the Bushes and the Reagans during that era, that if things would have been handled properly in the church communities as well as the political communities, we right now would be a self-sustaining country. We right now would be a country that would be running off of all 8 cylinders. We right now would see not only a revival, but something that would elevate into a revolution, to the point that we would see great leaps and bounds of prosperity and peace and utopia for not just a few, for not just the Americans, but for the world. But because there was a world conspiracy, And I'm still dealing with that resistance today. I want my viewers to know this. I am still today dealing with that same resistance. Because if I was dealing with a group of people that really and truly wanted to have change, the things that even Obama talked about, and we're not talking about change as far as the change that you put in your pocket, but we're talking about real change. I truly believe that the Windmill Ministries missions here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, would have supporters, would have a congregation, a Joel Osteen 24, 28, 30,000 member strong congregation. But I don't see that. I still see resistance, denial, rejection, non-supporters. So in reality, are we moving forward? We may give those inclinations of signs of making it look like that we're moving forward. But in reality, we're still taking, as far as I am concerned, one step forward and 2 steps back. 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And if you continue to do this over this long length of a time, not only is it going to break down the morale towards people resorting in sinful activities, corrupting their bodies, not taking care of their health, because they look at it like, well, you know, if I'm only going to live a short period of time and I'm going to have to resort to crime, I just as well stimulate myself some way or another towards getting some sort of good out of it. You know, how many times have I heard, whenever I walked up to people and said, don't you know that smoking cigarettes is bad for your health? And their reply was, oh, but I gotta die some way. Oh, really? So you choose this long, dreary death over maybe a heroic death. You rather die with an oxygen bottle in one hand and a cigarette in another, or a vaping device, than you would to try to straighten out your life and be a good example for others to follow. It's a mess. And of course, this president that we have right now, current President Trump, he's not going to get on TV and say exactly what he wants to say right now, because he's already won over the people to the point that now he's president. He's not a citizen. He's not trying to become president. See, whenever he was trying to become president, he was talking about all the bad stuff in regard to draining the swamp. Well, now since he is the president, he don't have to use that same line. He has, I admit, done some very, very good things here in America pertaining to our military, our veterans, looking at the crisis pertaining to the drug addiction, looking at the crisis pertaining to the border, looking at the crisis pertaining to China ripping us off. He has done some excellent, excellent things towards bringing awareness to the problems at hand. And he's actually turned into similar to a bad news barrier in bringing these problems to the surface, to the point that, yeah, he talks about respect, that now America is respected again, but he don't talk about the hate. America is also hated, and we've always been hated pertaining to our religious stance that we have taken with the rest of the world that stands in line with the Holy Land. We've always been hated, or we've always been I'm trying to think of the right word. Instead of admired, we've been just the opposite. Towards people snarling up their noses at us and saying, well, look at them. They think that they're better than the rest of us. But now, some of the things that Trump is doing could very well be causing not just a group of people that dislikes us because of our religious stance towards the teachings of the Red and the Book of Life pertaining to the Holy Bible, but now we may very well be cultivating more enemies than we are friends. And I hope that that's not the case. I hope that we have a society out there in other parts of the continent, in other parts of the world, regardless whether it be China, Russia, Australia, England, Europe, India. There's a lot of people in the world. There's like 8 billion people on this planet. And naturally, you're not going to be able to satisfy everybody, going back to what President Kennedy used to use, that you can please part of the people all the time. You can please part of the people part of the time, but you'll never please all the people all the time. Going back to his analogy, which I know that, and for surely to God he knows that too as well, and that's probably one reason why that he makes statements that if they take it, the deal, it's good, and if they don't, that's good too. In other words, he's been put in a position to where he hopes for the best, but at the same time, he probably knows to expect the worst out of some of these people in other parts of the world. Another thing that has complicated things that much more in the 21st century that we live in 2019, back years ago, we was more in control of the media because basically we only had ABC, NBC, and CBS to deal with. 3 major entities until CNN come into play. Now we have different people that has come into play that are from all over the world. And these are just a minimum amount of people that they have allowed into this room, okay, to do this interview. These are just a small amount of people that they have stuffed off in this corner right here, which give or take is about 25, maybe 40 people, because I can't see all the people down in this area. I'd say maybe there's 50 people there, and they're all reporters, and they all come from all parts of the world, everywhere. We didn't have that before, where now we do, which makes things even that much more complex, which makes people scrutinize and question what you say and the tone that you say it in, what you meant whenever you said it, why did you say it, did you mean this, did you mean that, people trying to add a little swag to their viewing base to make it more attractive or to make it more appealing. So the media that you're looking at there, the media frenzy, is another entity to add to the problem that we're now facing towards bringing more anxiety more corruption, more manipulative people into the circus of that atmosphere, to the point that it just adds that much more insult to injury to a already exhausted atmosphere here in America. How can we turn this around? How can the human race turn this around towards watching this deterioration, this cancer that is killing the American people? You can put band-aids on it. You can kick the can down the road. You can walk around with the ideology, well, I hope for the best, but I expect the worst. But the bottom line is this, and I'm going to end towards saying this, because I know to some of my viewers, they may be thinking, well, he's just going on and on and on. But the bottom line is this. It's the same way with an AA alcoholic member or a AA drug addiction member. You can put band-aids on it. You can try to fix the problem from the outside in. But until you're willing to fix the problem from the inside out and do something with the spiritual man, the soul of man, the internal fundamental parts of man pertaining to his soul, pertaining to his spirit, pertaining to seeing a great revival or revolution, you're basically just spinning your wheels. You're just like a dog chasing after its tail. You're moving. You're moving. Baby, you are moving. But you're not going nowhere. That's what we're seeing in this plague of disaster that has befallen the great land of the free, the great land of the brave, one of the greatest nations in the world. We have been contaminated from the inside out, just as one of the Russian oligarchs once said before Gorbachev, I think it was Brezhnev, that we will take over the American people and never fire a shot. That's basically where we're at right now. Thanks again for listening to the founder of the Windmill Ministries. Feel free to come by and to say hello. Feel free to pray for this ministry. Feel free to involve yourself in this ministry in either prayer or in other means that you feel led of God of doing. And if you agree with some of the things that I have just talked about, please let us know. And if you don't agree, please let us know that too as well. Because your input means a great deal in the successes of not only this ministry, but the successes of yourselves, as well as your children, as well as your children's children in the future. God bless. Shalom on this anniversary, 18th year, 9/11 anniversary, and let's always continue to uplift and to keep the memory of the victims of this particular day always, always in our hearts and in our minds. Shalom.